Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Otis Brown III record, The Thought of You. Modern rhythm powerhouse Otis Brown III, a drummer who has been the rhythmic backing for many a jazz artist, including the popular and Grammy Award-winning Esperanza Spalding, and avant-gardists like Oliver Lake. This is his full-length debut LP, which caught my ear, mainly because Otis seems to have the same affinity as me for 50s, 60s, 70s era quartet, quintet, trio style jazz recordings. And particularly for me, it is the drum sound of these records that I find to be so attractive, so clear, so crisp, so boomy, so close, so intimate. It's like I'm actually inside the drum set. This is a sound, this is a feeling that Brown and his co-producer Derek Hodge were very careful to recreate. It is incredibly fitting that this album is coming out in partnership with Blue Note Records, one of the most notorious and important jazz labels during this era of jazz. Now, being that Brown is a drummer and this is his album, rhythm does play an incredibly pivotal role in these songs. Rarely do I come across a drummer that I find their playing to be expressive, and this is definitely one of those instances. Usually an adjective reserved for people who are playing more tonal instrumentation. But there's an incredible amount of feeling in the way that Brown brings this pitter-patter percussion to the surprise cover of Shania Twain's You're Still the One. Otis's playing on this track is really busy but incredibly gentle. There are also a few gospel renditions on this record, my favorite being the one on the very end of this LP, I Am Your Song, and it is amazing how Brown just enhances the rising horns and Nicky Ross's vocals as just the song grows and expands and gets louder. Of course, there are a load of other musicians on this LP outside of Brown himself. For one, Robert Glasper is on piano, Keon Harold on trumpet, Ben Williams on bass, John Ellis on sax, Shedrick Mitchell on organ, and Nir Felder on guitar. The song choices on this LP, whether they be original or covers, seem to revolve around themes of family and faith and love, specifically love for his wife, who there is a few tributes to on this album. My favorite being the beautiful, wonderful instrumentation on the track The Two Become One. Weaved into these gorgeous, expressive, just really tear-jerking horns, there is an audio clip of what seems to be somebody officiating a marriage. The bass intro to the track is great. Robert Glasper's piano flourishes throughout the track are wonderful, and the horn harmonies are just killer. There's just a lot of mature, familial love throughout this LP. Also on the three parts of the title track of this album, The Thought of You, which features vocals from neo-soul singer Bilal, which has a very jumpy, nimble, jagged vocal melody on the track that just sticks with me. The thought of you clears mine, so sublime. Now this track, like I said, is separated into three different songs which are spread throughout the track listing of the album. The first part of these three songs being centered around a bop-style jam, loaded with fiery trumpet solos, and even though Brown's band is just watertight throughout this song, I guess I was a little underwhelmed by this track because it wasn't really an incredibly refreshing sound for this style of jazz. And another thing that I don't really gravitate toward with this track is the fact that it is split up in such a way where, like on part two, it seems like we're entering the song mid-jam, which in fact we may be, because the end of the first part seems to sort of finish with the song just coming to a very slow halt, as if in the middle of the track somebody just turned off the turntable. Maybe this second part would have been more enthralling had it been attached to the first in some way. And then for the final section of this song, I do dig it a little bit because it does bring a pretty significant change to the table. I think Robert Glasper's soloing on this track is great, really melodic and complex, but not too hurried or flashy. Tracks I'm getting a lot of enjoyment out of are like the opener, The Way, Truth and Life, which has this really dizzying, strange, and angular theme melody that is really difficult to wrap my head around, but still is very catchy. There's some really intense sax soloing on this song, punctuated by piano flourishes from Glasper. Brown is playing harder as the band is playing harder, almost as if he's egging them on. And I love the song Stages of Thought, which has this really ominous, looming, lumbering lead melody to it that I think is one of the darkest on the entire record. It's a really focused, fearsome jam. The bass and drum groove on this track is just nasty, and then all of a sudden, toward the back end of this track, Brown breaks into what kind of feels like a hip-hop beat, and Glasper complements it with these weird ascending, descending, sour piano notes, and together, this makes for something that sounds like it could come from a Wu-Tang record. Then there is the 8-minute gospel medley toward the back end of this track, with vocals from Nikki Ross throughout much of these passages. And this track is basically like your local Baptist church's music program on steroids. Brown and company are really not writing or delivering concise renditions of these songs in the same way that they did the Shania Twain track. They are really just riffing on these tracks, but still managing to muster some really wonderful building intensity, especially on tracks like We Exalt Thee, which seems to build higher and higher and higher with every crushing blow of vocals, drums, and horns. Overall, it's not a bad record. In fact, it is a very good and varied jazz record. There are some tracks I didn't really care for as much as others, and I think overall, maybe the album is a tad sort of rocky in terms of its flow. There are some interludes on this track as well, which I don't really care for all that much. And there are spots like the broken up in section title track that I don't really see playing that well in between key tracks of this LP. But still, if you're looking for a modern jazz record with some great composition, some great improvisation, and a fantastic vintage style recording, then I implore you to give this album a listen. I'm feeling a decent strong 7 on this thing. Transition, if you've given this record a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, Otis Brown III, thought of you. Subscribe, please. Forever.